Ever since their success with Street Fighter II, Capcom faced an ongoing dilemma. They had gone through numerous attempts at continuing to satisfy their fans, but determining what that next step should be soon became the problem. The Alpha series went huge by including everything, the EX series went toward polygonal fighting, and Street Fighter III went in a new direction that resulted in unfamiliarity. For their next attempt at reinvigorating fighting games, Capcom decided to give fans what they wanted by combining the familiar and the new in one big fantasy battle. In 1994, Capcom produced a fighting game using characters under license from Marvel Comics. The game was titled X-Men: Children of the Atom. In the game, the player could choose to play as a number of popular X-Men along with a number of villains from the comic book series. The fighting system was based on Capcom's other fighting games like Street Fighter II and Darkstalkers. The game also featured new abilities for a fighting game such as the Super Jump, Tech Hits, and Super Combo moves. Overall, X-Men: Children of the Atom was praised for being one of the better-made comic book-based games at the time, as well as a solid fighting game. The series continued the following year when Capcom released Marvel Super Heroes, a fighting game that featured a broader cast of superheroes and supervillains from the Marvel Comics line. The game played similar to X-Men: Children of the Atom, but simplified the use of the Super Combo gauge and added the ability to use Infinity Gems, which allowed for special attacks. For the next sequel, Capcom decided to combine their Marvel fighting game series with their popular Street Fighter series and what would come to be known as X-Men vs. Street Fighter. It was released in arcades in 1996. As the title would imply, the game featured characters from the X-Men franchise and the Street Fighter series. X-Men vs. Street Fighter was the first game to blend a tag team style of combat with the gameplay systems of both fighting game series. Instead of the usual best 2 out of 3 round format in the prior games, a match would consist of a 2-on-2 tag battle. Players could swap between 2 characters at any time and perform a combination of super moves with both characters at once. While one character is fighting, the other one will be able to recover a portion of their vitality. If one of the characters is defeated, the other one must come into the fight. The match would end once both characters on a team are defeated. The Street Fighter characters were pulled from the versions found in Street Fighter Alpha 2, but were given upgraded moves to have them on the same over-the-top level as the Marvel games. They included Ryu, Ken, Cammy, Chun-Li, Charlie, Zangief, Dhalsim, M. Bison, and Akuma. The X-Men characters from the Marvel fighting games remained mostly the same as they were in their original games. They included Cyclops, Storm, Juggernaut, Magneto, and Wolverine. 3 new characters included in this game were Rogue, Gambit, and Sabretooth. The final boss of the game was Apocalypse, who lacked a tag partner but made up for it with his large size. When X-Men vs. Street Fighter arrived in the arcades, it was met with a widely positive response from the fans. Many fans enjoyed the new streamlined style of the game along with the entire versus concept. While the frenetic gameplay and visuals became the latest craze, its simplified gameplay and balance issues kept the game from catching on among longtime competitive players. This would become more of a problem once the game arrived on consoles. The game was first ported to the Sega Saturn in 1997 and took advantage of the 4MB RAM cartridge add-on to produce a perfect arcade emulation. The game became rare in Japan as it had arrived in the declining years of the Saturn. Because of this, the game was never released in other regions until it was ported to the PlayStation in 1998. But due to the system's RAM limitations, the port was inferior to the arcade version in many aspects. The game became choppy and a victim to slowdown and long load times. Even the game's key tag team feature was reduced back to the best 2 out of 3 round format. The only way to have a tag team match was for both players to choose the same 2 characters in the crossover mode. With a rare Saturn port and terrible PlayStation port, many fans skipped over the game when it came to the consoles. Still, the game's growing popularity in the arcades was enough for Capcom to warrant another sequel. In June 1997, Capcom released in arcades a sequel to their crossover fighting game with Marvel Super Heroes vs. Street Fighter. Along with balancing some of the previous game's problems, the game ran on an altered engine, though it still looked the same aesthetically. Players could now summon their partner character to perform a special move without having to fully change characters. The same group of Street Fighter characters returned except for Cammy and Charlie, who were replaced by Dan and Sakura. Most of the X-Men characters were replaced with characters from Marvel superheroes. Along with Wolverine and Cyclops, the Marvel side included Omega Red, Blackheart, Captain America, the Hulk, Shuma Gorath, and Spider-Man. Apocalypse was still the final boss, but he was now joined by Cyber Akuma, a more powerful version of Shin Akuma. There are many secret characters in the game that came from palette swaps of other characters with different moves, such as US Agent, Mephisto, Armored Spider-Man, Mecha Zangief, Sunburned Sakura, and Shadow. Perhaps the strangest additional character in Marvel Super Heroes vs. Street Fighter was one that remained exclusive in Japan. Nori Maro was an original character created and owned by a Japanese comedian named Noritake Kinashi. He appears in the Japanese version of the game as a nerdy, cowardly school-type guy with a camera and a bag of various toy dolls. Nori Maro was meant to be an odd character who served as a fan of the other fighters in the game. He was originally planned to be in the other versions of the game, but due to cultural differences and many references to him stealing Chun-Li's panties, Capcom decided to make him not selectable outside Japan. A port of this game arrived on the Sega Saturn in Japan in 1998 and on the PlayStation in other regions in 1999. Just like X-Men vs. Street Fighter before it, the game suffered from a limited Saturn release and emulation problems on the more available PlayStation version. After the success of Marvel Super Heroes vs. Street Fighter, Capcom decided that for their next sequel, they should expand beyond just their Street Fighter franchise. This would lead to the addition of characters from Capcom's other fighting games as well as their other beloved franchises. The next game's premise would be more than just a clash between fighting game franchises, but instead a clash between two companies. On January 1998, Capcom released Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes in the arcades. While the gameplay was primarily similar to the two previous games, the new main features include the ability to summon an assist character and the duo team attack. Instead of players summoning their partner character to perform a special move, the function was now given to an additional character players could choose alongside their main tag team. These special partners consisted of many characters from both companies that either existed in prior fighting games or were just included for this feature. The duo team attack allowed a player to control both characters on the team simultaneously with unlimited super moves for a brief period of time. The only Street Fighter characters who remained in the main roster were Ryu, Chun-Li, and Zangief. They were joined by many popular characters from Capcom's other franchises who were now fitted for the fighting game. These included Morrigan from Darkstalkers, Captain Commando, a former mascot to Capcom, Jin Saotome from Cyberbots, Strider Hiryu, and Mega Man. On the Marvel side, Spider-Man, Captain America, the Hulk, Wolverine, and Gambit were joined by Venom and War Machine. The new final boss was Onslaught, who had to be defeated by the player in two different forms. Secret characters mostly consisted of palette swaps of other characters such as Hyper War Machine, High-Speed Venom, and Orange Faster Hulk based on his previous iteration, Morrigan with Lilith's color scheme and movesets, and Shadow Lady. The only secret character to have her own unique sprites was Roll from Mega Man. In 1999, fans were able to receive a greater emulation of the game when it was ported to the Dreamcast. The PlayStation version still suffered from issues and compromises similar to previous installments. The idea of clashing both Marvel's and Capcom's franchises together in a fighting game proved to be successful for Capcom, who decided to expand on the concept once more. For the next installment, Capcom decided to bring together the best of both companies into their biggest fighting game yet. It would not only lead to an evolution to the series' design and scope, but in the technology behind it as well. Back in 1998, Sega introduced the Sega Naomi engine, which stood for New Arcade Operation Machine IDEA. It was the latest successor in Sega's arcade system boards with technology based on their latest game console, the Sega Dreamcast. Unlike most hardware platforms in the arcade industry, Naomi would become widely licensed for use by other game manufacturers and one of the longest running arcade platforms ever. This new engine would be utilized for the next game in Capcom's Versus series.